Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order, about 9 minutes overdue here. What's today's date? 29th, November 29th, 2023. We have a roll call.
Commissioner Sager.
Here.
Commissioner Hartwig, absent. Commissioner Carpenter, absent. Commissioner Stahl.
Here.
Commissioner Perkins.
Here.
Chair Wheeler.
Here. Looks like we have a quorum. So got a few things on the agenda today. First thing is the approval of the November 16th, 2023 meeting minutes. We'll need a motion and a second on those.
Motion.
Here a second.
I'll second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Do we need any discussion on these? All right, no discussion. All those in favor, please raise your right hand.
I'm raising it.
Okay, thanks. All right, approval of the November 16 meeting minutes approved. Let's go on to the public hearing and why most everybody's here. This is for the downtown design review development code changes. And with that, let's go ahead and kick it off to planning staff, and we can get a staff report and get the basis for this and dig into it.
Yep. So as Evelyn works on pulling the PowerPoint up, I just want to note for anyone that is online that might want to speak during the public comment, public testimony portion of this public hearing, we need to receive an email from you ahead of time. What information do they need? Their name, address, and then the topic that you wish to speak on. This is a new city policy that was announced at several meetings in the past month and on the city website and social media. But in case any of you weren't aware of it, we wanted to give you an opportunity to email us today. And so if we receive your email, name, address, and the topic that you want to speak on, if we receive your email by 2:30 p.m., so in the next 18 minutes, then we can still add you to that list of approved virtual speakers. Otherwise, I'll just remind you that this is the first of at least two public hearings on this proposal. And so if you miss the opportunity to speak today, you can always attend the city council meeting for this proposal, which is scheduled for December 11th. And the email that you should send your speaker request to is planning, PLANNING, @cityofestacada.org. Okay. I think that's all that I need to say before Alan kicks us off.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So this is the beginning of the adoption process for this package of amendments to the downtown design review section of the development code. So just to note that these amendments were specifically requested by City Council, who worked with staff at 2 meetings in October to develop the code changes, basically figure out what they wanted to request from staff to draft. So today the Planning Commission will hear the proposal, hear public testimony, and then issue a recommendation to City Council, who will make the final decision on December 11th. Next slide, please. Okay. So the proposal that we're discussing, it includes code amendments related to the downtown design review process and development standards in the downtown zone generally. So I'm going to summarize the staff report as briefly as I can and explain how the proposal meets all the approval criteria. Then I'll hand it over to Taylor to discuss the amendments themselves in detail. And then we will conclude with a chance for the Planning Commission to ask any questions they might have about the staff report or the proposal. And then comes time for public testimony. And after that, the Planning Commission can discuss their thoughts and then vote on a recommendation for council. All right, next slide. Okay, so just a little background why we're here today. So at the October 2nd Downtown Design Review Committee meeting, it became clear that there were some issues with the code, like specifically around the standards and process of the downtown design review. That process. So then at the following city council meeting on October 9th, staff was directed to draft changes to that code section, which is 1626.050, which we then presented to council at the following meeting, which was on October 23rd. And then at that meeting, staff looked over the amendments that we had drafted, examined them, discussed them, and then further changes were requested by council. Next slide, please. And then that brings us to here. So the proposal that we're discussing today, it's called Ordinance 2023-008. And this ordinance comprises all of the amendments to the Downtown Design Code section that council has requested. Planning staff recommends approval of the amendments as proposed in the staff report. Spoiler alert. Okay, next slide. Okay. So in order to adopt these amendments, the city is required to conclude, that is to make findings that the proposal satisfies all of the approval criteria that apply to it. So these approval criteria, they include the statewide planning goals, comprehensive plan goals and policies, and also the city's own development code regulations that have to do with legislative amendments. So the staff report describes in details how this package of updates and amendments does satisfy each of the approval criteria that apply to it. And if the city council agrees, then they have the authority to adopt these amendments. So on the next few slides, I'm going to summarize how the package satisfies the criteria that are most directly applicable. Okay, that's it. So the statewide planning goals align pretty closely with the city's goals. And so they've been bundled together here by topic in this presentation. And so you see they're labeled, if they're S, they're statewide goals, C is city goals. And the first few goals are procedural. So they have to do with citizen involvement and requiring the city to follow an established comprehensive planning process, and then also requiring interagency coordination. And again, the report describes in much more detail how the city carried out all of those requirements. Next slide, please. And just to take a look at the non-applicable goals, there's quite a few of them. Yeah, the proposed ordinance concerns a limited range of development in the city, and it's in only one zone, just the downtown zone. So most of the state and city's goals were not applicable. Next slide, please. Okay, and now onto the applicable goals. The first bundle relates to economic development. Economic development goals are supported by an amendment to require ground floor commercial uses in all parts of the downtown zone that are located south of Highway 211, 224. And this would encourage the development of commercial properties in the Riverside area, which was identified in the 2019 Economic Opportunities Analysis and the Downtown Riverside Area Plan as a prime location for economic development opportunities and local investments. All right, next slide, please. Okay, and the second bundle of goals relates to the provision of housing. So in 2021, the city conducted a housing needs analysis, which identified that there was neither a deficit nor a surplus of land that was zoned for multifamily housing. So then in 2022, the city followed up those findings with the adoption of an ordinance that increased allowances for middle housing types and multifamily housing in several zones, as well as removing other regulatory barriers to the development of medium density and multifamily housing. So in doing that, the city increased the overall allowances for higher density housing types beyond what the housing needs analysis identified as the city's projected needs. This proposal would not affect the city's residential land supply, nor would it change density requirements, as it only proposes to preclude residential development on the ground floor level in an area that comprises about 10 acres within the city's downtown zone. So this change would constitute a slight reduction in the number of multifamily units that could be permitted. It does not constitute a reduction in the city's overall residential land supply. And moreover, the city's recent significant increase in that number, or that amount of lands that is available for multifamily housing, far outweighs this minor decrease. So staff finds that the proposal is consistent with these housing goals. Okay, that was a lot. Next slide, please. And the third bundle relates to transportation. Part of the amendments, we added, definitions were added of compact parking and pedestrian amenities. These definitions clarified the development and design requirements for transportation infrastructure in the downtown zone. And they would thereby foster the development of a variety of transportation modes for Estacada residents and visitors. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so now that I've summarized how these amendments meet the approval criteria, I'm going to hand it over to Taylor to discuss the specifics of the amendments themselves.
Okie dokie. Thank you, Alan. So as Alan mentioned, in October, the council discussed these issues related to the downtown zoning code and agreed to put together some proposal to remedy those issues. And so this ordinance mostly includes changes to that downtown zone chapter, which is 16.26. And the majority of those changes relate to the downtown design review standards and process. So clarifying and improving that process and clarifying and updating design requirements throughout the whole zone. And then there's also the amendment to prohibit ground floor residential in that riverfront area, which I'll show on a map in a moment here. That riverfront area of the downtown zone, which is all portions of the downtown zone that happen to be south of Highway 224. I'll pull it up on the screen. And then the ordinance also, as mentioned, has two changes to the definitions chapter 16.08. And those were items that kind of got flagged as missing definitions during that same design review process that brought all of these other code issues to the council's attention. Oh, I don't have control. I'm clicking things on my laptop. Okay. Thank you. So I have a couple slides here that are going to list out the specific changes that we have put together to accomplish what the council was interested in doing. So in the top right-hand side of the screen here, we're going to zoom in on this. I know it's small, but that outlined portion of the pink stripy section, all of that pink stripy section is the downtown zone. And then the part that's outlined in black is all parts that are south of Highway 224. So that's what we're kind of referring to as the riverfront area of the downtown zone. And that's the area where ground floor residential uses are proposed to be prohibited. And so instead of ground floor residential, someone could put in any of the other uses that are allowed outright in the downtown zone. There's a long list of retail and commercial related type uses that are allowed outright. There is also a list of uses that could be approved as a conditional use by the Planning Commission. So that's the one of the changes. Another change is to make this what's currently a list of preferred exterior building materials, change that from a subjective kind of, I don't even want to say requirement, because it's like our code is stating a preference, and change that from a subjective code criteria to an objective criteria, and turning it into a list of pre-approved, allowed materials. And I have a highlighted question for the Planning Commission here, which is something we weren't clear on, is whether clapboard siding or similar like horizontal siding should be included in that list of pre-approved exterior design materials, building materials. And so we wanted to explicitly call this out for the Planning Commission and for the City Council to clarify, do we want that included on the list, or do we want to include that on the list of materials that may be included if the applicant demonstrates that their design is consistent with historic building design. So that's a question we can get to. Currently, in the proposal, it does not include clapboard siding or like horizontal board siding as one of those pre-approved exterior materials. Okay. And then the last three items here, a lot of the majority of the amendments to this section relate to design review. And so what that involves is in the downtown zone, if someone wants to build something, just like anywhere, they have to submit a building permit application. But in the downtown zone, before they can do that, they have to submit their design proposal for us to review against the code and make sure that the design meets our code standards. And then when they pass design review, they can go ahead and submit building permits. Just to recap what design review is, if anyone needed a refresher. And so currently our code says that staff can conduct design review, any design review by themselves, or staff can appoint a design review committee to help them conduct the design review. And we together at the couple meetings with city council kind of determined it's important for the code to specify when staff should conduct the review and when a committee should conduct the review. So that's one thing that these amendments will clarify and distinguish is which types of proposals should be reviewed by staff for design review and which types should be reviewed by a committee. And the current proposal is to have any design review that's for a project on an existing building, staff would go ahead and conduct that review alone. And then any design review that would involve any new structure would be done by a committee. And so we also updated the membership criteria for that design review committee. And so it would need to have at least 5 members, whereas before our code didn't specify any minimum number of members. And for this particular most recent design review committee, we ended up with a very small group. And there were concerns about that. So specify a minimum number of members, specify the types of members. So we've got downtown property owners, downtown merchants, design professionals, planning commissioners, and or city councilors would all be eligible to be on that commission, and at least 3 of those 5 would need to fall into those categories. And then the other 2 could be just anyone living in city limits. Next slide, please. So here's where I promised I would zoom in on that, what we're calling the riverfront area of the downtown zone. If anyone needs to see this closer or has questions about that, we can loop back to that later, but I just wanted to make sure that was visible to everyone. Next slide. Okay. The rest of the amendments are also mostly related to design review. So what we're getting into here is noticing requirements. One of the things that came up was frustration that it was, we didn't have a set process for getting information out to the public when a certain type of development is coming through. And so even though a design review application is not a land use application, the suggestion here is that maybe we can go ahead and kind of go above and beyond, even though we're not required to send out public notices of these applications. It sounds like there's interest in doing so anyway, just for the public's information. And so what we've got in here now is if it's a staff review, so we're thinking of these as kind of smaller projects on existing buildings, we would receive the application, and within 15 days of receiving the application, we would publish a public notice in the newspaper and mailed public notices to property owners within 100 feet of that property. letting folks know what the proposal is and what approval criteria the city will follow in approving it. We'll be clear that there's no opportunity for public comment or any public meeting related to that decision. But it was important, or it sounded like it was important for the council and certainly some of the folks that we heard from during those meetings to notify the public of these applications. And then the other type of review is the committee review. So this would be for new structures. And what we're proposing here is to just follow the exact same noticing procedure that we do for land use applications, which is once we get the public hearing scheduled for the committee to do the review or the planning commission to do their public hearing, then we have to publish notice in the newspaper and mail notice to surrounding owners at least 20 days before that meeting. And we would include all the same information as we do for land use public noticing. That's going to be the most streamlined way to go about those, but we're definitely open to feedback if folks have concerns or other ideas. We also wanted to clarify that there is an appeal process for a design review decision, just like any other committee decision or staff decision has, there are options for people to appeal the decision, and we would just follow our existing appeals process in the chapter up here, 16.132. We also wanted to establish that staff, in the event that the design review committee makes a decision that we notice might put the city in legal jeopardy, we wanted to propose this option for staff to defer that decision to the city council so that the city council gets to decide whether, the city council is entitled to make those kind of legally risky decisions. But it seems like the council would want to make that rather than having a design review committee make that legally risky decision. So we staff would be paying attention to that process, and it's our job to pay attention to whether or not a decision seems to, or proposal seems to adhere to the code. And so if it seems like it conflicts with code requirements, we're going to defer it up to the city council. And at that point, we would notice that as well, according to the land use noticing procedure. Lastly, for design review, we wanted to clarify the limit of the approval. How long is that approval valid? And so a normal validity for that kind of approval is a year. That's flexible also. We have other types of application approvals that are 2 years. Subdivision approvals are good for 4 years. I think that would be excessive for this type of application. So yeah, that's recommended just to make sure, someone doesn't come in for a design review and then they never get started building and they come back 5 years from now and a lot of things have changed. Maybe the code has changed. They would not be grandfathered in that case, but we do need something clarified in the code to say how long that permit is valid. And then lastly, the two definitions that we added were for how is a compact parking space calculated, and what is included in the term pedestrian amenities. Next slide, please. So yeah, as Alan mentioned, we're recommending approval. We reviewed this proposal against all of the criteria that apply to it, and it satisfies all of those approval criteria. It is a proposal that came from the council and was based in both community input received and consideration of existing city policies and goals. And so we found all of those findings to support the approval. No conditions of approval would be recommended for this. And next slide. So the next steps here would be any questions that the Planning Commission has for us. Following those, we would take public testimony. I have not received any emails for public testimony, so it would just be folks that have signed up ahead of time. And then after hearing public testimony, the planning commission will have their discussion and vote.
Okay, so that's back on us here.
Back on you.
Okay, can we back up a few slides? Let's go maybe start at the beginning, because there were some questions all along. I don't think we need to go this far back. Maybe where the yellow highlight was. There we go. So let's start here, because this is the easy one to figure out, I hope. This is a recommendation on siding, right?
On siding, yeah.
So the current matrix, table 16.26.051, has clapboard siding listed. And then we put horizontal board siding in. To a guy in the industry, that's one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say we're taking one out and we're putting one in. Kind of like the hokey pokey.
Yes, well, we're asking whether or not you want to include that in there at all.
Is it better to exclude things than include things? Are there things we're trying to prevent? Because right now you could build with just about any building material. You could go to Home Depot or Par Lumber or a commercial construction place and build whatever you wanted. I mean, you got concrete, cinder block, brick, stone, horizontal board siding. We've crossed out board and bat siding. I would say that that's a legitimate choice. There's buildings in town that have it, in downtown, or similar materials. So I know we're trying to go for clear and concise and make it easier on everybody for both the design part when you're bringing a project here, and then for you guys. So like, is there something we're trying to prevent?
That's my question. My same question.
And then the other thing is we allow food carts. Are we going to require them to have these fancy sidings? Because to me, those are more of an eyesore than a building with board and bat siding if it's new and painted and within the color scheme.
Yeah, food carts aren't regulated by the building code, so currently we have no mechanism for regulating the appearance of food carts.
Except for the design code.
The
And the-
design code doesn't apply to food carts.
It seems kind of weird.
Yep.
Kind of like we're picking winners and
does.
losers, which I don't ever like when the government wades into that.
Yeah.
But I do like food carts occasionally, so I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah,
Maybe we need a piece for food, an amendment to this for food carts. I mean, I like there being a long list of acceptable materials. There's enough in here that people can manage to find something for their project that's going to look good and be reasonably affordable. I think most downtowns have that, and lots of places manage to have great, consistently good looking downtowns and, ample development while they still have requirements. So to me, I like there being specific things that you can use.
The other, sorry. The other thing would be, there's also an array of metal sidings that I would deem acceptable, whether that's heavy metal trusses or metal accents, actual metal siding, whether it's aluminum or tin, that isn't included. So if we're doing this once, we should do it completely, I would recommend. But I'm one of 5 people that can vote today. So that's one thought. The other question, I guess, maybe backing up while we stew on that a little bit, is what's the reasoning for this? The elephant's in the room. We know why we're kind of discussing ground floor, no longer allowing residential. What was the city council's struggle, if they're the ones who were urging planning staff to do this?
there were a number of different concerns among the council. there were concerns about just that whole area being built up entirely with apartments. And I'm relaying concerns about lack of kind of eyes on the street in that situation, resulting in more crime. Concerns about the appearance of the buildings that would go in. Help me out.
Jumping in here, one of the things that came up as we discussed this was some of the ambiguities within the design criteria were what came to us. It looks like the intent of whoever put down the original design criteria was to have commercial retail on the bottom. Based on window density, it's just some requirements in there that would not be applicable for residential, yet it wasn't spelled out to that effect. So what we were looking to do was have clear, concise measures out there that would define, here's what we want to have in the downtown commercial area.
Yeah, and that was also one of the questions that came up was, okay, we have this requirement for all of the ground floor levels to have at least, I think it's 50% of the facade needs to be transparent elements, windows. And then there's transparency elements for upper floors too, but a 50% transparency requirement on the ground floor might seem inconsistent with residential uses. However, someone at that meeting did bring up that that fourplex on Zobrist accomplished that with like glazing, kind of glazed windows so that you don't have people looking directly into your home. So yeah, that raised the question and kind of requires a council interpretation of what was this intended to apply only to only to commercial development, or was it intended also to apply to residential development? And we're looking to get things more like what we see in that Zobrist fourplex.
As the person that built the Zobrist fourplex,
You did.
it was a discussion for sure. It was the first building in downtown that was new after the downtown and Riverside zone was developed. Riverside zone. And so there was some hurdles as we went through it and said, well, does that make sense? No, yes. Ultimately it got grandfathered in because there was a little 1,000 square foot house there. And they said, well, since you had a house on on ground level, you can do it residential. I can tell you with 100% certainty, if that was a commercial downstairs, that building would not exist. Just to be frank, because it doesn't make any sense to put a space down there that you're going to rent for 90 cents on the dollar and, be vacant a lot of the time versus something you can put $1.25 or $1.50 per square foot and rent out consistently. And it looks nice. People reference that building frequently when they're talking about the downtown and Riverside zones and the new buildings. So my concern is that we are going to kill projects before they get started. And if that's the intent, let's just come out and say it. Because that's the kind of the thing we went through with the marijuana zoning code years ago before most of you guys were here, was you can't do it here because it's got to be, and I'm not a marijuana proponent or dissenter. But just for the record, we can't do it here because it's too close to the parks. We can't do it here because it's too close to this. You can't do it here. So we pigeonhole. We push it out to the industrial park, and nobody's going to buy $1 million lot to put a 500 square foot residential retail pot shop on it. So inherently, we eliminated those from being allowed. And if that's the intent, then I think we should just come out and say it. So then the developers just bypass us and go to Sandy or Molalla or Oregon City.
I want to agree with Ben. I mean, I've talked to developers who have talked about, wanting to put in residential stuff downtown and the idea of there having to to be residential or having to be commercial on every first floor in a, you know, in the town where there's not a lot of demand for commercial, you know, for somebody to put in one of those 4-story buildings like is popular all over Portland with the commercial on the ground floor, it just doesn't pencil out in a place like this. And, you know, adding that in across the highway, adding that zone in. I mean, to be honest, the conversation around, you know, the conversation that created this whole project was one of the most appalling public conversations I've ever seen. I can't even believe that we are entertaining the idea that people who it's saying in public meetings that people who live in 1-bedroom apartments are more likely to commit crime, or people that aren't in a family are more likely to commit crime. I mean, I just think we're courting a lawsuit first of all, and it would be well deserved if we're going to say that certain kinds of people living in certain kinds of places or with certain kinds of income are criminals de facto. And I just, you know, what is our goal for the downtown? If we don't get, you know, if we don't want people living downtown, what do we think is going to happen there? If we don't want the downtown to be walkable, but we have all these, you know, transportation ideas and density ideas, what is it? What are we doing? What do we think is going to happen? And I really am against this, you know, this adding more spaces that are just going to kneecap density in the one place that it really should be. I mean, I don't love some of the sprawl that we do, you know, tearing up wetlands and putting in houses that are all right around on top of each other. But here's a downtown with a bunch of undeveloped lots or empty buildings. Let's put 4 stories on there. Let's put even 2 stories. You know, something. Let's get something happening. Let's get people that can go to those stores and businesses.
Kind of went off on a tangent there, and thanks, Tara, for that. Adding in. Tom, you got anything? Questions?
Okay, the rumors around is this downtown zone includes over by on Lake Shore. Okay, I seen the map there. But so way back, the state restructured our way of getting out of there. Okay, you can go down Elm Street and get on the highway, but you gotta go like this and hope you don't get hit. You get people drive really fast, or you can go down and go on the light. My concern, and a lot of other people I've talked to down there, is this is our main exit out of here. So if we build a bunch of stuff in there, you know, that more power to you, but we have to think about the transportation. How is that light going to cover it? I tell you, my wife almost got hit 3 times just trying to cross on the green light. Nobody stops. So,
You're speaking about walking or driving?
driving.
Okay.
They do both really, but anyway, that's something that we need to think about. Is that something that would be in the thing? If for some reason you do develop that area or down, there's not much down there to do, I don't think, but.
If someone develops that property with an outright permitted use, then they would just be required to develop the property itself and the frontage improvements on the streets that abut the property. So they wouldn't be doing anything related to the traffic signal or any
So
new
would the
traffic
city
signals.
look into that, or?
Well, the city wouldn't look into that in response to a specific development, but the city is we're about to adopt our
You know,
updated transportation
I
system
know,
plan.
You know, basically what you guys are doing, but I just want to make it out publicly.
Mhm.
The other thing is, you notify. This has been my pet peeve way back. But you notify a person of 100 feet from the action, the building. That's your neighbor.
Mhm.
That's all it is. 100 feet is your neighbor. You know, somehow the city's got to, let get us involved too somehow. Like down here, you know, we all come up Lake Shore, we all go meet one place, but we don't have a say so. Or they don't either, so. I come to these things and
Ryan, you got anything?
does that make any sense?
Yes.
Mhm.
A couple questions, I guess. The language that's been altered, proposed in green, particularly looking at 3 on page 7 of 12 or 6 of 12. Did that come from anywhere or did you create that language on your own?
Item,
Sorry, downtown design guidance and standards, 1626-050, which is page 7 of 12. It's the stuff you went over though, Taylor, just the,
yes. Oops. That language was probably, so how did we go about this? We looked at an example of how another jurisdiction or how other jurisdictions establish their design review process. We attempted to kind of model something off of that and realized that wasn't going to work. So some of the language might have come from that, but we really did overhaul it and think
Yeah.
specifically about what does Estacadas, what would work for Estacadas processes and the staff capacity and systems that we have. And this is what we came up with. So it's mostly not modeled off of anything specific.
okay. But a group of people collaborated in that decision of language?
Yeah, that's
To-
mostly
Okay,
the two of us.
awesome. Thank you. And if you were to draw the hierarchical design of this review, as I read this, it would state that the city, for anything existing, city staff could maybe unilaterally is the word, has the authority to just say, we want to review this.
Right. Yeah.
And then if we went down that pathway, then whatever the findings of that unilateral determination, would that still get vetted through the city council and through our planning and city, or is that an autonomous decision?
That would just be a staff decision, and if the applicant wanted to appeal it, at that point, they could appeal.
Then
it
they'd
to
go
city
through the
council.
process.
Yeah, but it wouldn't need to then go to city council for final determination. It would just be a staff determination.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then, so then the second fork in that road is the committee, and that would be any new opportunities. And then would that group of 5 consisting of various people, does that flow through city, what are we, planning commission and city council?
That would also not go
Okay.
to the planning unless appealed.
Okay,
And the way that would work, technically staff will issue either decision, but for type 2 with a committee review, the committee helps staff issue the decision. And unless staff disagrees with the committee based on like legal concerns,
Right.
then we would just relay the committee's decision in our
Okay.
issuance document.
okay. Following this language, can you give me an example, simple one, of what would constitute a city staff authorized review?
Like a paint, like repainting.
Okay.
Which
Or
is a
like
very simple one. So if someone like, let's say that Sol Tapatio wants to redo their front facade, they want to have different shaped windows, they want to change the fixtures and the colors and the building materials. that would be a renovation or a, you know, redevelopment kind of an existing structure. The use would stay the same. The use is already there. It wouldn't be creating any new buildings. It would just be changing an existing one.
Okay,
That would be something that
example,
staff would
okay.
review. So they would submit their design review application. We would go through and punch down the list of criteria and check against what they have. Yes, it meets this. So not sure on this one. Here's what they would need to change in order to definitely meet that.
Yeah.
And we would issue all of that as findings, just like we do in a land use staff report.
Yeah.
Next to each criteria, we have to publish those findings. And then if the applicant let's say we denied it because we weren't able to find that they met certain criteria. If they disagreed, they could then appeal that, and that would go to the planning commission or the city council. And they would point to that finding and say, we disagree with this finding, and here's how we actually
Sure.
do meet the criteria. And then there's a path towards approval there.
And then vice versa, if someone were to buy the vacant lot next to US Bank and they wanted to build something, then that group of five then would ultimately be assembled, and they would be kind of the HOA oversight of making sure that they fit this design.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And then back to my second question, which goes back to Chair Wheeler's questions and concerns, and maybe more for Commissioner Strobel in this too, just with the historical intent. And so we, the city, want to be prohibitive in first level space in any of the downtown area from it being constituted as any form of residential. Is that the overall goal inside of this?
The current proposal.
Yes.
Yes, the overall goal, I think there's probably a mix of feelings about that overall goal. One of the things that came up during certainly the more recent council discussion on this was the possibility of having, of requiring some ground floor commercial, but not all, right? So not completely prohibiting ground floor residential in that area. But having, requiring some kind of mix of residential and commercial uses. I think there were enough folks on the council that wanted to move forward with the full prohibition, that's what ended up in this proposal, but there was definitely a mix of feelings and willingness to entertain
Okay.
that, some kind of like mix there.
And irregardless of the intent of the proposed language, it doesn't impact anything that's currently in existence when it comes to residential, correct?
Right,
Those things
yeah.
would be,
Yeah.
so, okay,
And also just to clarify, it's only in certain parts of the downtown. It's not in the entire downtown zone. So the proposal is just to prohibit ground floor residential south of the highway. And then
okay,
what is it? Broadway, Main Street, or the highway. So that's
got it.
still, those three are where it's
Okay.
currently prohibited, but the proposal is just to extend that prohibition south
Okay.
of the highway.
Go ahead. I've got one more, but go ahead.
No, I'm just mulling things. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Is this back to the city review and committee review? Is this or something like this common in other municipalities? Or is this something that we're trying to do to try to do something, again, back to the original question of Ben?
Is it common? Yes and no. Most cities have a really clear tiered review system for all types of applications. And they have clear divisions between the types of applications that staff can review, type 1, the types of applications that require some discretion that might be a staff review, but there's an asterisk there. Sometimes it would go to a committee. And then decisions that require more discretion are going to go either to the planning commission or even more to the city council. And a lot of jurisdictions have really clear delineations between, they have a clear typology for that. So that's what we were going for here.
Uh-huh.
However, so in that sense, it's more similar to what a lot of cities do. And a lot of cities still do have this exact type of thing for design review. However, with newer, I mean, in the past like 5-10 years, state laws around clear and objective criteria, it's becoming more common, and the goal is to eventually get all cities here. It's becoming, more cities are recognizing that if there's a decision that requires just clear and objective criteria, for example, a residential subdivision application,
Right.
residential development must be subject to clear and objective criteria.
Right.
And so
And
if
it's very
there's
spelled
no,
out, right?
if there's
Yeah.
no discretion there, it can be misleading to hold a public hearing and to have a review board conduct their review of something that in theory staff should be able to do, because we should be able to go down the list and objectively say yes or no to each criteria. Our code is not there yet. And so unfortunately, a lot of sections of our code still require a lot of discretion because they're not yet clear, or not yet objective. A lot of the changes in here are bringing them closer to clarity and objectivity.
Yeah.
But the city is overdue for a complete code audit and clear and objective kind of overhaul. So
Would you consider this to be a stopgap until that spot, or?
yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my final question, which is really more of just inquisition about you, your team, and the city. Do you hypothesize that with this new review process, that this is going to make your team busier? Do you hypothesize that there will be more requests for this? Is this an attainable adjustment for city staff to add on to their plate?
Thank you for considering us. It's definitely attainable. It's a process that if gets approved, however it gets approved, we'll we have kind of a library of our process documents. We'll outline the process there to match what the code tells us to do. And it's not something that I anticipate adding much to our plate generally, because we don't get a ton of downtown design review requests. There just aren't that many applications that come in. So
Good,
I
thank you.
don't see I see it solving more problems. I see it preventing more headaches than it will cause.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay. Any other questions?
All my subjects.
Just a couple things, if I could, to clarify some things also, and Taylor, jump in if I'm off base here, but the design review is already part of what the city does on a regular basis. What we're looking to do is clarify when the city can just do the design review on their own versus when it should be sent over to a commission or to a committee
Yeah.
as well too. Because at this point, by our ordinances, the city can just do all the design review by themselves, but occasionally they will, for a bigger project, have a committee have a look at things. So we want to know when it should go to the committee.
Right.
And then some of the changes with the language in terms of giving lead time to the public was just to make things more open and welcoming to the community as well too, that they know when this is going to happen.
And I'm sure the answer is no, but just to be clear, just for my own clarity, hotels and motels are not considered residents, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Those are considered commercial.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Strobel, too, for that.
So is there, there's single family homes right in that area that are, already, I guess I would love somebody to make a better argument for why we're including that zone that isn't specifically to prevent the development that was proposed and that the reason we're trying to prevent that is because of crime. Is there any better argument, any more salient reason why this needs to be added?
Tara,
We're
just
not
clarify-
we're not in dire need, as far as I can tell, of more land for commercial space.
Tara, just to clarify, you referenced the single family homes. Are you talking about the downtown zone as a whole? Or
I'm talking about the area that we're adding. So right across the river, or sorry, right across the highway in that area, that's edging up on plenty of residential.
it definitely is
space.
adjacent to it, but I don't
Yeah.
think there's actually any houses in there unless it's that northwest corner. There might be one, or is it?
I don't
pro-
see any housing in that chunk of downtown. I think, yeah, like Commissioner Wheeler said, it's adjacent to, but it's not, yeah, there's nothing in that downtown, so.
Okay, but I mean, it's right next to it. That's a residential area. Why, yeah,
Yep.
why is it? That's my question. Why would it, I mean, I would think that there's already residences in there. It's a park-like atmosphere. We would want to have, that's a section of downtown that we would welcome some residential mix in the mix. So I would love to hear some other reason why.
Is
Okay.
that residential down there? Or is it commercial?
No, it's the downtown zone. From Ondoy to the bridge is
Okay, but you got, that's what I'm asking, you got Red Fox, that's a business. Then you got the fourplex behind it. Then you got beside the Red Fox, you got the storage sheds, so that's a business.
so that's all commercial.
So
or-
everything, it's everything, so what is that designed to have?
Well, that's what we're diving into is what exactly this downtown zone, this little island of downtown zone is. Everything further down is the Riverside zone.
Right,
Um,
that's all residential, basically.
Yep. Let's answer Tara's question, and I think, Paul, you had an answer for that possibly?
Yeah, I've got a few bullet points here that discussion items that the council had, and Councilor Metcalf, you can feel free to jump in here too. I don't know if this will specifically answer the question, Tara, but it hopefully gives some insight into some of the discussion. Again, all this is on YouTube as well too, so you can go back and review that. But there is an understanding, our housing needs analysis showed that we do in Estacada need more multifamily housing. That needs to happen. That's something that we want to see happen. In this particular area, one of the concerns was we were developing the riverfront area. We've got big plans for that. We want that to be a welcome area for people to use. And then the thought would be, would an apartment only complex with no retail, no commercial, would that encroach on that? Would that create a barrier to have people come down? If it's an apartment only, that wouldn't be as welcoming for people to come down. That's kind of a stopping point, was one of the concerns that was brought up. Whereas if there were retail or commercial involved in that, then that would be a more welcoming area to come down for people. But on the flip side, we discussed there's a reality, and it was brought up here that there's, and as you said, Tara, there's not a lot of people clamoring for retail space right now either. So if we had something like this in there, would that create more empty spaces in Estacada that are not being filled?
We do get regular calls for retail spaces.
Okay,
Yeah, and it's
Clarification.
not a huge demand, and we have no way of quantifying that demand, but we do get several calls a year. And I know where the Wednesday Wine Bar went in, they had 10 applicants for that space. So there is a demand. I don't have I don't have numbers to quantify it, where we have a market study planned for the beginning of the year that would help quantify that, but we do have some demand for retail space. And I know people complain about the empty buildings, and it's not necessarily because they can't find tenants. It's because vacant landlords and people who own the properties aren't willing to do anything with them, more than it is that people aren't demanding the use of that space.
all right, thank you. But that was one of the things that came up. And then as Taylor mentioned also, there was conversation is there a compromise? You know, can there be something, can we have retail, commercial on one side, residential on the other, or end caps, something along those lines? Can there be a balance in there that would be allowed, that would still allow something like this to move forward? And especially with some residential on the bottom, that would help out with handicapped spaces as well too. So those are just a few of the things. Counselor, I don't know if you have anything else that you might want to add there.
No, I think you pretty much covered it. I mean, I just want to reiterate that a lot of the idea to specifically answer why change the not proposed to do more commercial versus residential was to preserve the welcome and open feeling for the community to access that riverfront, with some of the plans with them talking about installing a bridge across and other things like that, driving more traffic. And then there was also talk about, Mr. Dunlap had mentioned previously that he was concerned, well, what about support existing businesses versus bring in new? And we did agree that that is something that we could do more of, but i.e. having new, more welcome, more modern space would actually probably drive, especially during the tourist time of the year, it would actually bring more business to that side of downtown, which would bring more patrons to Get and Go and Bait and Tackle and Red Fox, all those other existing things. So I think that the intent there was to keep it welcome for the public and for the tourist portion of what we're developing as we open the river more for public use and stuff like that.
I mean, I guess I would ask, is there budget or a plan or a timeline for doing any of this stuff? And what is one of my questions, you know, for using this river space, is any of that afoot? As far as I know, it's not.
Yes.
And then what is the height limit on buildings in that area?
So for the lakeshore access project, that we just very recently finished the 100% design and engineering for that project. And I actually just got a call yesterday from the project manager with PBS about some funding opportunities to get phase 1 of the project built. So that's something we could expect within the next couple of years.
And we have some funding already dedicated from PGE for that project. And then we have had some of our legislators reach out to us and say, we want you to submit applications for funding this project.
That's great to hear. I mean, my impression has been that it's been sitting for a long time, so I'm glad to hear that. I guess I would also say it's a little bit hard I heard a lot of the conversation around this, and my impression was not really that the thing that got all of those people out there was to talk about this was about keeping that area welcoming. That just wasn't the tenor of the conversation. If that's become the rationale or there's an upside to it, that's great. I can see that argument, but I also heard the other side of it, and I think that we need to be realistic that was, as Taylor said, the crime idea and all of that was a big part of the conversation too. Yeah, and I would just say again, a compromise or something that allows us to still encourage development of this area with some kind of residential space that's workable, that where the numbers can be penciled out for developers would be great, because like Ben said, it's difficult for people to make it work, and he's not the only person that I've heard say that.
Okay.
Tara, if you don't mind me asking, are you referring to social media conversations between people, or are you referring to conversations between you were here when the city council, or watching live when the city council discussed it? And I do not mean that at all in any kind of a disrespectful rhetoric. I would just say that the conversation we're having is on the guidance of why did the city council, is what you're ask for this. And the conversation was around preserving access for the waterfront, The crime, there was conversation, as you'd see if you've watched on YouTube or if you were present, I can't recall, but there was conversation around that, but the rhetoric came back to removing personal feelings and what was the objective of the feeling and the flow for that area. And we were trying to establish that the old downtown code that we were referencing was from 2011 or 2013, which is over a decade old, and that we're looking at this in other ways. Simply put, we have met also with the developers. Some of the city council has and spoke with them on our ideas on how they can involve the community and do other things that would give them options to move this forward as well transparently. But I would just like to clarify that some of the conversations you may be referencing are being had in social media, and sorry, but I can't validify something being spoken on the internet versus rationale in person.
Yeah, it's both on the internet and in public comment in person. And some of the people that were pushing it on the internet are very connected to city council. And so it's not very, I find it a little disingenuous to be like none of that was considered by the city council, whatever. It doesn't, it really, in the end, we can say that, we can say that we're doing it for this other reason. That the decision isn't necessarily about what the public dialogue around it was, or the backroom dialogue. But I mean, I'd love to know if there are developers that are saying that they will develop mixed use stuff in this area. Like who is that, and what's that plan? What were those conversations?
Paul, you had something else?
I was going to chime in. Tara, you might have been referring to the October 2nd review committee that's out there on YouTube as well too. And that's where some of that initial public comments in opposition to this came about.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Well, is there any other questions from planning commission at this point in time? Comments? Okay, I think we've kind of discussed the high points. Always the bigger issues at this point. Why don't we do this? We have 3 speaker request forms here. Let's exit out of the planning commission meeting and into the official public hearing. I'll call up these one by one. We have a 3-minute.
3-minute.
3-minute
Yes.
time allocation for these. And then I have a statement to read about evidence presented at the hearing here. So first one up will be Zan and Susan Hamilton. Come on up. We'll have you guys introduce yourselves. And while you're getting ready, I'm going to read this. Statement about evidence presented at the hearing. An issue which may be the basis for appeal to the city council must be raised prior to the close of the record at the final evidentiary hearing on the specific application. Such issues shall be raised with sufficient specificity as to afford the city council and the parties an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. Failure of an issue to be raised at the hearing in person or by letter, or failure to provide sufficient specificity to afford the city council and other parties an adequate opportunity to respond to the issues precludes an appeal to the city council on that issue. That's a lot of words. If you guys could introduce yourselves and take it away.
I'm Zan Hamilton.
Susan Hamilton.
We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk to the Planning Commission. I'm Zan Hamilton. I'm managing partner for the Estacada Lake Apartments development team. We're proposing a substantial renovation of the Red Fox Motel and the development of the Dunlop Riverfront property. We understand that the council is considering it. The current downtown building code prohibit ground floor residential on the Dunlop property. In our due diligence process, we validated the need for multifamily in the downtown area stipulated in the comprehensive plan revised 2022. In summary, it said multifamily is encouraged for downtown zone to revitalize downtown commercial businesses. We think by adding more housing or across the way and putting in residential and retail, we think the retail will be hard to fill and it'd be in direct competition to the comprehensive code that you put out in 22. I personally believe the ground floor retail will eventually make sense. The property is good and I don't know, I think if we do it all at once, I think it's a recipe for vacancies. It'd take a long time to fill. And that'd be a problem. And this would also include Larch Street for retail, which I find hard to believe, and Beach Street. We're not against retail at all. It's more revenue for us. We'd like to do retail if it worked, but our issue is timing, marketability, and feasibility and need. Retail should happen when the market desires retail, and I don't think that time is now. If you add a bunch of retail, there's going to be an impact on the downtown and on the riverfront. We have 2 studies done to address this issue. Actually, one was done by the city of Estacada in 2019 by the Cascade Partners, and they were not in favor of mandated retail. And the report, I believe, is on your website. The Estacada Lake Apartment LLC also had a study done by Johnson Economics in 2023, and it came up at the same conclusion, and we've provided that to your staff. We also have, I believe, Johnson Economics speaking to this point now. We believe that the prohibition of ground floor residential, thereby mandating retail on the ground floor, is a big mistake.
So I don't have much time, so I'm just going to say that in talking to many of the city councilors, the mayor, city staff, we've heard repeatedly that involving the community and transparency and getting people an opportunity to be heard is important. And we agree. We've been meeting with a lot of people, and to the effort, well, we're going to have a website that's coming up soon. It should hopefully be up by the end of the week. We'll be adding information as it comes available. We have heard a lot of the concerns. We've addressed them. We've changed our plans so many times, I can't even begin to tell you. But I guess I can't really go into it right now. But there will be a website that might even be up on Friday. So look for information there.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up, we have Jordan Winthrop.
Clarifying question. I was wondering if I can ask before I speak about the map that you guys had up there, because I thought the community center was part of the downtown zone now. Is that not accurate? The community center?
Not yet, but it was, you're remembering correctly that we discussed rezoning the community center, and it is still on our work plan list,
So it's not part.
but it
of
is
the
not yet part of the downtown zone.
Okay. So yeah, thank you for letting me speak.
And I'm sorry, could you speak into the microphone?
Okay, yeah, thank you for letting me speak. My name's Jordan Winthrop. I own property, commercial property on Broadway Street downtown. I have 2 tenants in there currently. I would disagree with the fact that there are a lot of people who are looking to seek their business in downtown Estacada at this time that have good business plans that will actually stay in business. Both of my tenants have not been able to pay, and if I could replace them, I probably would, but there is no businesses out there that want to come into Estacada at this point. And if the city is getting requests, I would love them to be able to send out to people like me who are looking for this kind of business instead of having non-paying tenants. So first of all, I just wanted to say keeping the center of gravity on Broadway Street has been part of the comprehensive plan for a long time as part of the downtown Riverside area plan of keeping downtown Broadway Street the core of retail. I believe if retail was across the river, it would create a disconnect in the downtown core with the businesses that are here. Like I've heard before, it is very hard to cross the highway on foot or by car. If there are residents over there, they will be able to navigate that very easily. They'll leave to go to work in the morning, they'll come home at night. If there's retail in that location, there'll be cars coming and going all the time that don't know how to navigate that location. So trying to put retail down there is just going to make traffic a lot worse. It's not going to help it. I've done work at the Red Fox property before, and I've got to know some of the tenants there, and I've heard things about crime and things like that. None of the people I have met like meet those requirements, or I'm not sure what you guys are talking about. There are a lot of elderly people, younger people, and I think that this would expand the need for that type of homes in Estacada. And I think those type of people would be shoppers in Estacada as well. So what we need are people to shop here and not necessarily more business space at this time. The thing I heard about building materials as well, I just want to bring up real quick, because my building, I put corrugated unpainted metal and untreated barnwood, and the city was very against it. And that's why they created this whole code about painting in the first place, is because they tried to stop me from redesigning my building, and it needed a lot of help. They could not stop me from doing it, and I did it, but now they have code to try to stop other people. And I don't believe that you guys should try to create code to stop development in this town. It should be able to be used to help development, not hinder development.
Thank you, Jordan. Last up, we have Sam Dunlop.
Hello, so I'm Sam Dunlop, a local business owner. Had the Cazadero for 35 years, managed the Red Fox since the late 80s. And I just like to go to the map because it's so good. So my folks, when this property is, Acacia goes right through here, used to go through here. There are several houses there that we put on, demoed, and everything was centered on multifamily down here. And so without my folks vacating the road, this whole property would be single family homes, much like the rest of Lakeshore. So I think going forward, multifamily is needed in town here to go ahead and benefit both my businesses here at the Cazadero and the rest of downtown. And that's why there should be such a big push for multifamily. The things that could be developed here, and I said this to the city council, Andale faces the highway, makes a natural for retail space. The old mobile station makes great retail space if you're going to put a new building there. But if you want a center, the community center is a beautiful underutilized facility, which I think, in this connection to the dock down here, really makes that a centerpiece where you could park, you could have functions. It's a beautiful underutilized facility that can do that. And then the Rock House, which I love the Rock House, needs to be incorporated into the city because it's one of the most beautiful historic pieces we have in Estacada. So I think that should be highlighted. I know it's on the historical list, but going forward, this downtown, it seems like you're just imposing something, maybe because you don't like the project. But to say that you can't have any residential on the lower floor, somebody said it earlier, is that some of the people that we're trying to reach out and get here are people that lived out of Estacada, still love the community and want to live here. Well, those residential downstairs are the most feasible for them. So there's been several projects like this. My folks always wanted to put condominiums down there. Any kind of multifamily was going to work, but Estacada receives these recessions, and I think it's more, it's harder for small towns to come out of that. And for every time we thought we were going to be able to put a project together, it failed. I had the sign up there for over 10 years about the local that, hey, come here and build some apartments. And these were the first folks that had a plan because they love the property. And I think you can make the property as beautiful and accessible because you have apartments there. Anybody can live there. If your folks come out here and wants to live next to you, you have an opportunity there to live and work in the same small town that you love. And I really think that the retail down there, it's blocked off. You're going to get no walk-by traffic. You get no car traffic by it. I think we should try to make that project the best possible. And I think there's other areas that you can develop, like the community center and Andale and that such. So thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thanks, Sam. Oh, and we have one online. Would you queue him up? I can't read the writing or the name on it.
Hi, my name is John Spicklin. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. So good afternoon, commissioners. As I said, my name is John Spicklin. I'm a senior associate with Johnson Economics in Portland. We've been working with the Hamiltons and the Estacada Lake Apartments team on the Red Fox site. And I'm going to speak specifically to this proposal to prohibit ground floor residential use in the riverfront area. So Johnson Economics is a land use and real estate consulting firm that provides assistance to cities and counties as well as to private developers. And we have conducted a lot of analysis over the past 4 decades on commercial, residential, and mixed use development. And part of our work is to estimate the financial performance of new projects. And we work on projects that pencil and move forward and projects that don't pencil and therefore are never built. When we look at this proposal to prohibit ground floor residential use in this area, we recognize the good intentions behind it, as I'd like to think there are good intentions behind it, as most people like to see active commercial uses on the ground floor. And developers prefer the commercial spaces too, because in the right areas, those are more profitable than residential units. And they also generate higher residential prices in mixed use buildings. So we typically see developers stretch themselves quite far to try to accommodate and attract commercial tenants. But because the financial incentive is already there to build ground floor commercial space where it is viable, there is no need to require commercial space or prohibit residential space. So when we consult for cities, we very rarely recommend this kind of code, because what it does, it essentially tries to force commercial spaces where they're not viable, usually subsidized by residential units. And we've seen this requirement used like that in many jurisdictions over the past decades. And the most visible result in areas where residential rents are high enough that they can subsidize some of the commercial space is lots of space sitting vacant for many years. Even in parts of the Pearl District in Portland pre-COVID, this was the case. And often when space has sat vacant for a while, prospective tenants will avoid that space and even the surrounding area because they now have a clear indication that this is a poor location. So this often has the opposite effect of what's intended. And the invisible impact of this prohibition, which we see because we work on these projects, is this is especially in the areas where the residential rents are not quite as high as in the Pearl District, is all the residential projects that are never realized because the cost of building that ground floor space that can't be leased at adequate rates, that makes these projects unfeasible. And that's what we would expect to happen in the riverfront area, in part because of the separation from the pedestrian portion of downtown by a highway and the lack of visibility internally on these sites. So we now actually see many jurisdictions begin to roll back these requirements because they realize that 1, they haven't worked as intended, and 2, we're in a housing crisis and we should encourage residential development and not discourage it. And we should especially encourage it in downtown areas where services are available and new residents can contribute to increased vitality that in turn can attract more commercial tenants organically. So if the city really wanted to go forward with this, we would suggest that you talk to the development community first to hear about their experiences with this kind of prohibition or requirement and how they think it will affect development in this specific area. And we will be happy to provide contacts to active developers in region that have nothing at stake in Estacada, if that would be helpful. But because we are quite—
Thank you, John. Oh, John, sorry to cut you off, but you're a little bit over on your 3 minutes here.
Okay, sorry.
I appreciate the time and appreciate the input on that. And that report will be available or is available in our packet. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. Is there any other public testimony? Okay.
We received, I should note that we received, you all have this printed in front of you, and Tara, we can make this available to you. But we received 6, actually, this is a repeat of the same person. So 5 letters in opposition to prohibiting ground floor commercial. And
say that again. opposing, prohibiting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Five different testifiers saying we should not prohibit ground floor commercial
Okay.
or
Thank you.
ground floor residential.
They would like.
We
ground
should
floor
leave it as
residential
is.
To be allowed.
Continue
Double
to allow it.
negative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Well, at this point in time, since we have no more public hearing, or public testimony, let's go ahead and, jump back into the planning commission meeting, here at 3:34. And can we bring back up the next steps here we have on that slide? Motion options and next steps. Let's go next steps first, if you could. Thanks, Evelyn.
so next steps will be, we've just gotten through questions, public testimony. And so now we're looking at the planning commission's decision, which will be a recommendation to the city council. And so I just put the two, I think, most likely motion options on the next slide would be move to approve as is or move to approve with some specific changes. And so in order to discuss any changes that you might want to make, we'll need to first have a motion on the floor and then a second, and then you can
Then we
open the
discuss.
discussion before voting.
Okay. So I'll, at this point in time, then I'll ask for a motion so we can get this into a vibrant discussion if needed.
Well, I'll make one to approve the amendments with the exception of the one about the ground floor residential.
We got a motion?
What's that?
Can I clarify the motion here?
Yes.
And so the exception would be to just leave it as is. So continue allowing ground floor residential with no specification of any mix on the ground floor.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
great.
already There?
Thank you, Tara.
And
Yes.
then, and this, Tara, just another clarifier. This is just speaking south of Highway 224 211, not in.
Yeah, I mean, if it was, if it was my party, I'd say let's allow it wherever, but that's not at issue here. As far as I understand it, we're keeping it as right now it's prohibited on Main Street and Broadway. And what we were looking at was just adding it to the area south of the highway,
Okay,
right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
so we have a motion.
Well, I'll second the motion just so it's on the table.
Okay. So we got a motion, we got a second, we can discuss now.
Now explain the motion.
So her motion is we're gonna follow the staff report as shown, with the exception of everything south of Highway 224. If there was a multifamily, or if there's any development down there, they could put residential on the ground floor.
Right, it should.
Okay,
But what about up here?
no, this is all gonna stay the same. So Broadway and Main Street would still,
So we still gonna have our core?
yes,
But.
we're not touching that. That's as is.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Tara, do you have any further discussion?
I mean, I thought the speakers were really compelling and all of them, thank you guys for coming in. I think we would be looking at a lot of dead space there and or really just nothing happening. So I think I've kind of already rambled enough about my reasons, but I would just echo what the speakers said.
Okay,
One more question.
yes.
They said that there's the city's got a paper on developing down there. Is that going to be publicly out so the public can look at it?
The market study you're
realize
talking about?
I probably shouldn't, but I'm thinking of the people down from the on Lake Shore. Because and I know it really probably won't affect us a bit. But is everybody gonna get that memo, or is it gonna be on the internet, or?
So as, at this point in time, and correct me if I'm wrong, but with the motion as it stands right now, we are electing to appoint a design review committee. And during that design review committee, there would be opportunity, there's a window in there, right? That it's public knowledge.
Mhm.
And I'll read directly out of the,
Okay, but so can I see that before? At least me see it? So it makes me feel okay?
It's on page 7.
Cause you know,
Page 6 and
you know, I talked business with my wife on this. And she's all against it, but she hasn't read the paper at all. She's
No.
listening to me.
sure.
Um,
What, hang on, just check one clarifier. On the 45-day. Is it 45 days on the type 2? No, that's on type 1. Is that an open public, comment period? Or is it a notification period? Or is that just the timeline that you're giving yourselves to review it?
We need to set a timeline, a deadline for the city to issue a decision. So that's what that is.
Okay.
For the type 1, there wouldn't be any public comment. I don't see it would be
No.
misleading to collect public comment.
Yeah. But for type 2, is there a public comment period?
It would just be up until the date of the meeting,
Okay.
just like this hearing, you know.
Okay.
But
Does that work, Tom? Does that
Right.
answer your question?
I just want to make sure you guys know that I've been around here and what Sam said, I remember. You know, that area wasn't the best, but Lakeshore wasn't the best, so. And look what they've done. So any improvement or anything that would help these guys, it probably will be the best thing to do.
Okay.
So my thing is, I just wanna know what's going on. That way, somebody asks me, I can say, well, it's only residential houses, or they're gonna, right now, the rumor is they're building big buildings, you know,
Recommend them to talk to the planning staff.
that's what I tell them,
Okay.
and they won't do that. Those guys are mean.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Tara, did you have something else you were gonna chime in on?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so.
Quick procedural question.
Yes.
If we vote to, if we, the group, vote to approve the proposal with the amendments that Lakeshore remains as is, then does the city council, do they have the ability and authority to change that based on what we said?
Yeah.
You mean
Yep.
change it back?
Yep, so they
Yeah.
might receive your recommendation and disagree with
say
the
no.
findings or the
That's what
reasoning or.
They usually don't.
Well, I don't want to set them up in either direction.
yeah,
I was just asking a procedural question. Yeah.
But yes,
See,
Thank
my only problem with this whole thing is I think Esther Kitty needs a core. So walking down there through the street on my exercise, I look in the windows. Am I gonna look at somebody's house now?
Not over here.
That's what I mean, over here.
No, not over here.
Okay,
This is there, that way, south of,
Right?
south of 220.
correct.
yeah, I'm just.
Yeah.
She's kind of hesitating.
One question that I thought, and it's not included in this motion would be, and it might be something you guys have done in your research. Assessing a timeline, we say, commercial on the ground floor. But give them a timeline. If it goes 6 months without any applicants or viable options, rather than sitting there vacant like the Johnson Economics guys say, after 6 months, you guys are free to convert these to residential units.
But that's such an extra cost to have to do that,
that's a cost
that
of that.
afterwards,
It-
you know,
it- it
versus being able to do it as part of the development and plumb all that stuff in. I mean, that's a lot of extra steps.
It absolutely is. I hate the thought of putting the death dagger in any project because of something. And if there's a way around it that you can work through and get multifamily going. The warm and fuzzy side of the commercial, yeah, if we're in downtown Sherwood and you're walking around and there's thousands of people driving by every day and it makes sense, great. Or if they can make it viable, great, but if not, give them an out to say, hey, you can convert this to residential. Just a thought.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something you guys
Interesting.
encountered anywhere.
Okay,
Jump
but
in.
thought.
I just think we'd end up with developers being like, you know, it would be just another hindrance to people being like, what do you mean I have to then like go back later and do this and, you know, spend this extra money? It's, I get what you're saying about a compromise. I mean, we could maybe there's some other compromise. I'm not sure if that one solves our problem of appearing to be unfriendly to that kind of development.
And I don't disagree with you at all, Tara. I was just,
Yeah.
I sometimes regret opening my mouth and stupid ideas.
No, no.
That could be boxed in one of those, but it's an idea that's that could be floated depending on how things go.
Nothing
Elsewhere.
prohibits somebody from opening up a bottom floor retail down there either though, correct? So one could be an apartment complex and right next door could be a retail shop with an apartment complex. Like it's still, the ability for that still exists.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
and I think the speaker's point was great about, I'm sorry, I don't remember John, his last name, but that's, if it's viable, that it would be, you know, it's the preferred usage because it is more lucrative if it's workable, but it's just, you know, in these spaces, people have determined that it's not workable for, you know, through all of these studies, and you know, developers know what they're doing. If it was workable, they'll put it there, and if it's not, they won't. And that's this, you know.
Okay, any further discussion?
Just got one comment about all of this. I looked at that property down there and just on the tertiary look of it, I thought to myself, I've been in retail business for 42 years, and especially small businesses like that. And I don't see how that's functional at all down there. Doesn't make any sense. You can't get people into it. You can't get people out of it. You know, nobody can see it. So who's going to shop it? Except for maybe the people that live around it. And that's some hope, you know, but, you know, at this point, I don't see where that's viable there. I mean, it's just, you know, maybe in 30 years from now, it might be. At that point, you know, make a different decision about it. But right now, and maybe in the next 10, 20 years, it's not a viable option for that specific area. The rest of it, fine. You know, as Estacada builds itself up, you know, it wants to be fairly uniform and be a good place for people to come and do business, you know. And for that specific property, I think this amendment actually, or this proposal makes more sense than what's currently out there.
Thank you.
See, it's not that big a walk from down there to here. You know, like I said, the dangerous parts of the highway, right? You just gotta keep your eyes open.
Well, go for it. Just go for it.
Paul, last name?
Yeah, it just to be clear, it's not just retail, but retail / commercial, which would allow, we just expanded the places that daycare can be established as well too. So this could be something that could allow for something, you know, along those lines as well too.
Well, hybridization, I'm sure, would be probably more interesting. And Portland does a lot of that. You know, they have a lot of buildings that are big residential buildings, you know, that have maybe, you know, one space in them, or corners, you know, where you might have a store on a corner, or you might have, you know, a beauty shop or something in the middle of them, you know, but they're all right on street front, but the rest of it is all apartments and stuff like that. So, you know, some hybridization is possible, but I don't know if it's, you know, intelligent.
So if I vote yes on that core stays like it is.
Yes. Okay, I think we've discussed. All those in favor, raise your right hand.
Aye.
Or say aye.
I think you're unanimous.
So this will go to the city council on a date.
Okay, Monday, December 11th.
Monday, December.
And
11th.
I sure hope that meeting starts at 6. Is it gonna be 6:30? Do you know? I'm looking at Elena. I don't know if you know off the top of your head. 6 or 6:30.
Sounds right.
It won't start earlier than 6.
It won't start. No, we have 6 a.m., 6 p.m.
Yeah, 6 a.m.
6 p.m. We have a workshop, and then 6:30 we'll start the meeting.
Okay. Great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Looks like we got a little more commission business with park space discussion updates.
Yes. Okay, so as I think we discussed the last time we had a formal meeting on the parks issue, we were putting off any forward steps on this until after the new year. The last meeting we had was with the Parks and Recreation Commission, who were excited to work on this issue. I should recap Commissioner Stahl briefly. We earlier this year, maybe around summertime, August, we were discussing the need for the city to update and boost its park code requirements and park and recreation kind of plan and like capital improvement plan to make sure that as the city grows, park space, open space, and recreation facilities are provided for the community, kids, and just the whole community really throughout the city.
I'm familiar with the code.
Okay, yeah, currently our code is woefully, underperforming. And so, yeah, we started that conversation, and there've just been too many things going on. We're in the middle of we're at the end of the TSP update and other, we have all these land use applications. We just haven't had staff capacity to work on it. But it's something that we will be able to reconvene about after the new year. The Parks and Recreation Commission is on board, and it seemed like the last time we discussed this, it seemed like the next step might be to get together with the city council. Either, and so this is a question that I have for the planning commission. Would you want us staff to kind of relay the concerns and the general proposal and kind of direction that the planning commission has in mind, relay that to the city council and find out what they want to do? Or would you want to try to schedule a joint meeting, which might push it out a little farther because scheduling can be a little difficult?
Sure.
Go ahead.
This one's kind of my pet project of why I'm on this commission. Just so you know who's like ramming the charge here. I'll take it. I would like to do whatever moves the processes in the most expeditious fashion. And I'll let you make the judgment on what moves it along. But at the end of the day, it's still a high priority to me that prior to approving any other residential development of 40 homes or more, which I anticipate we may be seeing here sometime soon, I think is another opportunity missed. And the why behind all of that, again, is because the Estacada School District shoulders the entire burden of youth athletics and youth community use. And if you go to other thriving communities in any of these developments, there's enough park space for a baseball or softball or soccer field. And I think we have an obligation as a growing city to ensure that there are other spaces for kids to play and to play safely inside their neighborhood developments. And so just reminding the why of inside of that. And as growth continues, I really want to urge the city staff to just move in the appropriate and necessary means possible to make sure that I'd like to start seeing language. And I don't know if what's the process when it comes to that, but that would be the best next step, in my opinion, so that we could start working through what language would look like as we try to get in front of the applications that are coming in.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, I've already added it to, we're coming up on the end of the year, which means we staff are sort of preparing to get together with the council in January for their annual goal setting. And that's a time where Melanie, the city manager, brings them kind of an updated list of their, here's what your goals last year were, here's all the progress we made on those, and here are our recommended additions or changes or kind of updates to those. And that is something that I think maybe was included in their goal setting conversation last year. We had this long list of code issues that we
Sure.
put before them. So it's not new to them.
Well, and we
but
know it's in the
something we can-
strategic plan also, I
Yeah,
believe.
It's
So,
in,
yeah.
it's in a bunch of plans.
Yeah.
It's something we're, behind on. So yeah, that's something that I'll add to our list for that conversation and figure out what's the fastest way to move that forward, whether it's a joint workshop or some other kind of next step.
Thank you.
Are you thinking January?
I'll have to ask. January is usually a pretty busy first month, but yeah, I guess I'll need to find out what the council, I don't know if the mayor would make that call, the mayor and Melanie maybe together would decide when would be an appropriate time. I'm aware, just from the things I've been hearing other staff talk about, I'm aware that there are multiple commissions that want joint meetings with the city council, so we'll see.
I know that I could go and hit every city council member one-on-one without any concern of the need to find common time to get together. I think this is something, well, if they have adopted their strategic plan and its mission, visions, and values, it would be hard to oppose. And so I don't think this will see a lot of opposition other than from the developers who are trying to get through the process. But I'm happy to work through that. Yeah, and I can do some of that work as well if that's what's necessary. But what I can't do and where your role comes in is the expression of the language to put into the codes. And I think both of those can happen at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to both add this to the goal setting recommendation list. I'm also going to just see if we can maybe have a sort of brief, just kind of informal discussion at one of the upcoming council meetings, just with the council, and let them know, kind of remind them, I think we've talked about it already, but it's been a few months now, remind them this is something we've been working on. We're ready to start taking the next steps on this. And get a sense for how involved they want to be. It might be the case that they look at the priorities and goals that you all and the Parks and Rec Commission are pursuing, and they feel like those are all great and we support that, and we can be a little hands off, and we kind of trust our committees to do the good work and direct staff along that process. Or if they want to be more involved, when would they want to have those joint workshops and how do they want to be involved? So I'll get a sense for that at one of their upcoming meetings.
Okay. Was this downtown design and no residential and commercial was that one of their goals for the 2022-23 year?
No, that came up.
So we can keep going regardless, right?
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're good on that?
I think so, unless anyone else has comments.
Okay. Any other commissioner comments? Terry, you have anything to close us out?
Nope.
Okay. Looks like we got a next meeting date of the 13th, which is 2 weeks from today. That's still a good date as
Yes.
far as everybody goes. We still have something on the agenda?
Yes,
Not
we
meeting to
have
meet?
multiple land use we have 2 land use applications on that agenda. There's a subdivision modification for Faraday Hills, and there's a conditional use extension for the Superior Tape and Label. You might remember it was back in 2018. Going in on going in on Veterans Boulevard.
Right. Okay.
So, yep.
Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn this at 3:58.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tara.
Thanks, guys. Bye.